Okay, so I got all the quizzes. Anybody still have a quiz? Cool. Everybody has dice? Sweet. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is have you guys, if you're not already logged into the computer in front of your face, go ahead and log into that and check our BB Learn out. I'm going to have you guys submit the guided reading questions for this week's reading assignment through BB Learn. So I just wanted to show you guys where that's at. So we're going to go ahead and click on the to do each week thingy. And then that will bring up week 1, week 2. We're in week 2. So when we click on that, you guys should have those PowerPoint slides for today. This USGS fact sheet about humpback chub and rainbow trout is what you guys need to read before Thursday. And here's some questions that you guys need to answer. So download that Word file. And as you're reading that fact sheet, type your answers in. And then when you're done, you'll submit it through this little portal thing. And you can see that it is due on Thursday, September 2nd at 12:44 p.m., which is exactly 1 minute before class starts. So I want you guys to have read that paper, come prepared to talk about it. And the way that I'm going to make you be prepared to talk about it is by turning in this assignment. Okay. Again, it is 4 pages long. Most of it is pictures. It is written for at an 8th grade level. It should not take you long to read this paper. When I worked for the USGS, we had to talk a lot about, or like, write at a level that politicians could understand. And that's what this paper is. So, okay, questions about that before we move on? So you probably, I'm sure you guys have submitted stuff a million times. You can write a submission by clicking on that box, and then you can say, here's my answers, blah, blah, blah. Or you can browse your local files wherever you saved it on your computer and just hit open. I'm going to hit submit or cancel, and then you hit submit, but I'm going to hit cancel. And so that's what I want you guys to get into the habit of doing. I'm going to have you guys do that every time we have a reading assignment. Okay. Let's do this thing. Okay. Oh, you jerk. I spent so long fixing you. All right. What did I do before? Was it this? No, it definitely was not that. I had to go like this and click that button. Nope. Whatever. You guys are going to see this. That's probably fine. Okay. Oh, also, while you guys have your computers open, make sure that you can find that spreadsheet that I sent you a couple of hours ago. And also, let me do this. So I think I'm going to close the windows and turn on the AC. Is that okay? Yes, yes. But everybody's like, yes, please do that. Cool. So pull up that Google spreadsheet for a hot second while I do this. Ooh, that sounds fun. Let me know if you get too cold. I don't know if that's going to be a problem today. Okay. So Google spreadsheet should look like this. When we get there, you'll type your name in here. and I'll tell you how to do it. I just want everybody to make sure that they can pull that up because this is your points for today, playing this little game that I made up. Okay, I have too many of this. This is not. Okay. Nope. This should work, right? Like it should do it when I click on this button, right? Am I crazy? Probably. Whatever. Okay. Is this okay? All right. So we did the quiz. We're gonna now we're gonna talk about characteristics of invasive species. Okay. We did this. You guys turned in your quizzes. You picked up some 100 dice D100. Okay, where are my nerds at? All right, got a couple nerds. All right. So these are D100s. So we'll talk about them later. Okay. All right. First thing I want you guys to do is to take a minute and to think about what happens when a species arrives on the scene in a new place. What are the what are the possibilities? Look at the next slide. There's 3 possibilities that could happen, right? So you could fail to establish, you're just like, well, this sucks. There's some kind of environmental control, or there's like, you can't compete for resources, or for whatever reason, you just might not get a handhold into that new environment. Let me just click, well, whatever. Okay, the other alternative is that you can become established but not cause harm. And what are our 3 types of harm that invasive species can cause? Ecological harm. What are some of the other ones? Economic harm. And what's the third one? We're kind of dealing with it right now with these things on our faces. Human health, right? Okay, and so that is the definition of an invasive species. So if you got that on the quiz, it has to be introduced to a new geographical area from where it originally evolved, and it has to cause some kind of harm. Okay, so we saw that slide. Okay. So now we can get to this idea of the TENS rule. And this is, again, a rule in biology. And what's the #1 rule of biology? There's always an exception to the rules. So we have this rule of 1 in 10 species that are introduced are going to actually become established. And of those that actually become established, 1 in 10 will actually become naturalized. So I actually need to change my spreadsheet, my thing here in a minute. Does that make sense? So the steps are, can you even hack it in the new environment? And then do you cause harm in one of those 3 ways that we talked about? So there's a filtering process where you lose 90% of those on each of those steps. Okay, and this is where it's useful to become a nerd. So these are D100s. D just stands for dice. So what I'm going to have you guys do, and I'm going to edit this because I just realized that I put the wrong numbers up there, is I'm going to have you guys roll these dice 10 times. And in that Google spreadsheet, you're going to enter what you rolled and then the outcome, and I'm going to change this right the heck now. Maybe. How do I get out of here? End slideshow. Okay, so we're going to go 89. And so then this would be 88. Okay. So go ahead and pull up that spreadsheet and throw your name in that spot. And if somebody gets there before you do, you just go to another spot. And who the heck is texting me right now? Okay. So, okay, so you pull that up and then, where's my thing? Okay, so then in that, sorry, you guys, my brain is in like a million places right now. Okay, so if you cannot roll 200. So you got a tens die, right? That's the ones that have like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, etc. That's your tens place. And then you have the one that's just 0 through 10. That's your tens place. So I'm going to roll, let's see, so I just got 67. Okay, and then here where your outcome is, you're going to type failed to establish. Okay. And so I'm going to click back to this screen so you can figure out what your outcome is. And give me like a woohoo if you get an invasive species. Woohoo. All right. Yeah, we got a woohoo. We got 2 woohoos. We got 2 invasive species so far. Okay, so how are we doing on that? Did everybody get their 10 rolls in? Cool. So in this case, the probability of becoming an invasive species is 1 in 100, right? And so that kind of follows our 10 rules. This was randomly selected, right? We didn't know. Okay, so let me ask you this. How many of you guys got one of these, were able to establish but not cause harm? Almost everybody. And then how many of you got an invasive species? 3. So, you know, if we roll, like we expect that these dice, unless they're trick dice, to give us a 1 in 100 chance of hitting any number, including 100. Is that how ecology works? Is that how real life works? No, there's some things that can favor a species becoming established. And so that's what we're going to talk about this week. Today, we're going to talk about what are the characteristics of the species themselves. And then next week, or on Thursday, we're going to talk about what characteristics of the invaded environment make it easier for a species to become established and invade that environment. Do you have a question? Okay. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so now I gave you guys a scrap piece of paper. except for 3 people. Katie? Okay, and Luke, and Yaz, not here today. Okay, so what I'm gonna have you guys do now is take a couple minutes and like partner up with a dude sitting next to you. And then maybe I'll have Janice and Damien, because you guys are kind of like loners. I'll have you guys come scooch together. But like otherwise you can pair up with the people next to you. And then if you're kind of an odd man out, just kind of find somebody. I think you guys, yeah. Anyway, figure it out. Get with a partner and spend the next 5 minutes thinking of things that characteristics of a species that might allow you to be really invasive. So like, so think about like reproduction, think about interactions with other species, think about resource acquisition, okay? So I'm gonna give you guys 5 minutes, I'm gonna set a timer, talk with your partner about it, and then we're gonna kind of come up with a list that I'll write out on the board that avoid things that you guys thought of, and then I'll talk about the things that I thought of and we'll kind of compare. Okay. All right. Ready, go. Five minutes. And you guys can work in groups of 3. You can get up in there if you want. So did you guys come up with a good, a hefty list? Okay, 4 or 5. All right, pick your favorite one. Okay. And then when you guys are kind of done brainstorming, pick your favorite one that you guys want to share with the class, and I'll kind of go around and pick on you and make you say it. You guys can see my horrible spelling. You guys pick something that you think is good. Okay. Okay. Does everybody kind of have their favorite characteristic that they think is going to be the most beneficial to invading a new environment? Yeah. Okay. Lots of babies. Okay, who else picked high reproduction? All right, good, good, good. Okay, who else wants to be brave? Yeah. No natural predators. Why no predators? Why would that be beneficial? Right. Nobody's eating you, so you can just go crazy. Awesome. Okay, back row people. Who's gonna volunteer? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So being able to withstand harsh conditions. Okay, anybody else say that? Yeah, kind of similar. Okay, let's hear it. Yeah, so we can kind of think about, like maybe the environment. That's not how you spell that word, whatever. Is it? Did I spell that right? Somebody that's not super dyslexic, tell me if it's the V in the I. Okay. I was diagnosed with like severe dyslexia when I was like 30, and I was like, oh, that explains a lot, you guys. Oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Okay. So things that might contribute to the environment, if it is a harsh environment, like really high temperatures, really cold temperatures, really dry, that might actually prevent some invasions. Okay, so let's hang on to that for next week. Okay, anything about the species itself? Yeah. Okay, so a better competitor. Okay. Competitor, something like that, whatever, I don't care. Yeah. Okay, so we call that being a generalist, where you can use a variety of resources, and so you're not just bound to to eating a couple of things, like you can eat anything, you can use a lot of those resources. So to make that like more broad to include plants and animals and everything, we call that a generalist. Okay. So we got a list of 5. Anybody else want to add one up, throw one more up there? Yeah. Okay. Fast growth. Why would being able to grow quickly be advantageous to becoming an invasive species? Right, so you can get big fast and then you can defend yourself. Claire? Same thing? Yeah. Yeah, so you can reach sexual maturity in less time, and so then you can have lots of babies. Does anybody know the sciencey name for having lots of babies? Reproduction, okay. Fertility, that's a good one. There's a very specific fitness. Is that what you're going to say too? Okay, what were you going to say? Fecundity, yes, is fertility. That's making lots of babies really fast. But fitness, this idea of fitness, is not necessarily how many babies you have, but how many grandbabies you have. And ultimately, or like how many copies of your genes can you leave after you're dead and gone? That's what evolution cares about. That's what biology cares about. That's why mother-in-laws are always like, when are you gonna have babies? That's why. Okay. All right. Awesome. That is a fantastic list, you guys. That's great. So let's go through what I said and we'll compare and contrast that list that you guys came up with and what I came up with. Okay. Rapid population growth and short generation times. There we go. Baby making. That's useful for increasing that population levels quickly. Okay, and you guys said the short generation time, we have those kind of nested in this, that the fast growth is beneficial because so you can make babies quicker, faster, more babies. If you can have, so like mice, for example, they're able to have babies within like 6 weeks of being born, and they can have litters every 6 weeks, and they can have multiple offspring in one litter. And so they can have tons and tons of babies real fast. Okay. Some other things that I came up with are generalist to wide environmental tolerances. So you guys came up with that too. If you can live in a lot of places, the probability of that place that you were introduced to, you're gonna be able to hack it there, right? If you can kind of hack it everywhere. And then this is effective dispersal mechanisms. If you can get, you want to get your babies far away from you so that you're not competing with those same resources, right? So that's why we have, so I remember I'm a cottonwood person. And so all that fluff that's released in the spring is the cottonwoods dispersing their seeds. They want to get their babies into a different place where their babies can establish, but where they're not going to compete with the mom. So, and we'll talk about, let's give some examples of that right exactly now. So here we have the gypsy moth. Does anybody have experience with these? We don't really have them here so much. It's kind of our Eastern US, Eastern Canada thing. Anybody experience these? So they were introduced to the US by this dude that wanted to improve the native silk moths genetics. They wanted to be like, all right, I want you to survive in more places. And so I'm going to hybridize the silk moths with these tough gypsy moths. And so the silk moths are going to be more productive. They're going to live in more places. We're going to be able to get more silk. Silk will become cheaper and I'll make more money, right? That's what this guy was after. And this is whack because this used to be a Google Slides and then I'd put it in a PowerPoint. So sorry, the words are weird, but whatever. Okay, so some years, it's fine. You don't even notice that they're there. Other years, they can totally decimate populations of trees because they're hungry little caterpillars. So in 1981, an area larger than Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut combined were completely defoliated. So these little caterpillars went and ate all the leaves off of trees that's larger than these 3 states together. Okay, so here's just a photo of what they can do. So you can see these areas, these trees that are not defoliated. When I first looked at this picture, I was like, oh yeah, that looks right. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, this is not Arizona. Everything's not supposed to be brown. Like all of this brown are dead trees because they were defoliated by these gypsy moth caterpillars. All right, so how do these fit in there? So a female can lay on the order of 1,200 eggs in a single growing season. So we got our rapid population growth, right? We got that high fecundity thing. And then they can spread up to 13 miles a year. They have short generation times, which is, kind of a characteristic of insects, generally speaking. So like that fits our characteristics of an invasive species. They have that wide-ranging habitat. They can eat, they're generalists. They can consume the leaves of over 300 species of trees. When I was an undergrad, just to give a contrasting example, when I was an undergrad, I was studying an aphid that only lived on certain individuals of cottonwoods. And it wasn't just like cottonwoods as a species, it was like that guy and that guy and that guy host a ton of these aphids and that guy don't host any. So that would be a specialist to contrast this. And again, we can find them anywhere from North Carolina up into Quebec, right? Huge temperature range, huge range in day length. And then again, they're similar to other moths in the fact that, and as far as their dispersal methods go, except that females cannot fly. And so one effective management way, a management practice that's effective against these things is you put this like gooey stuff around it's called tanglefoot. It's basically like sticky silly putty. And so you put that around the base of the tree and the females go to climb up the tree to lay their eggs up in the canopy. And then they get stuck on in this gooey tanglefoot. And then they can't climb up and lay the eggs. And the adults don't eat. They don't even have mouths. So all the defoliation comes from that caterpillar stage when they're babies. Okay, but if you can keep the moms off of the trees, then you're good. Okay, some other things that an effective invasive species might have is a single parent or vegetative / clonal reproduction. So you might be driven by asexual reproduction. And what happens to genetic diversity when you only have asexual reproduction? It goes in the tank, right? There's hardly any. So keep that in mind. So here's our flowering rush. And somebody drew that as their favorite invasive species on their quiz. So give yourselves a pat on the back for that. This is another one of those. This is one of those guys that was introduced because it's pretty. right? Again, not one that we have in Arizona so much because, you know, it's for wetlands and we live in arid zona. So, okay. And it creates these thick mats that prevent boats from getting through, wildlife from getting through. It creates a monoculture instead of having a diversity of plants and animals in this wetland. You just have this one guy. Okay. How many of you guys have heard this crazy word rhizome before? Couple. All right, botanists out there. So it really doesn't produce seeds so much, but spreads by these rhizomes. So these are underground stems that connect plants. How many of you guys have to deal with aspen suckers? Same concept. These stems that grow underground from the parent tree, they grow underground and then they pop up a new plant. And even if that rhizome is severed, now you have two individuals that have the same genetics, but that can withstand. And so this guy can send out rhizomes and send up new shoots. And that's how we create these monotypic stands of these clones of this one species. And nothing else can compete in there because it's so great at spreading. And even if you go in and you try to rake it out and you try to cut it out, those little fragments can reroot and resprout. That's another reason why bindweed is such a pain in the butt around here. And so natural things can also cause this fragmentation. Okay. We talked about this as this white nose syndrome that gets on the bats, this fungal pathogen that can literally decimate bat populations. It creates this little white nose. These are called conidia. It's asexual spores of fungus. And so we've been able to track the spread of this, but also we're able to track the genetic diversity, and it's all the same guy. They're not sexually reproducing. It's just the clones of these that are spread by these conidia that get on our clothes and on our gear, and then we go spelunk in another cave, and we've introduced that same clone into another habitat. Okay, and then contrary to that, just to make everything confusing, we could also have high genetic variability in invasive species. It might be useful to do it this way, and it might be useful to do it that way. So what are some examples of that? So here's this cute little guy. He's so cute. So this Melodonase, whatever, can't pronounce those because I'm real dyslexic and I don't know what that means. But this little snail was introduced in association with aquarium plants. So like we were like, oh, this is going to work really well in our fish tanks, and this guy like hitched a ride. So we had this is an accidental introduction, right? And the way that it causes harm ecologically is that it creates parasites for fish, native fish species, and it can also infect us. Okay, so that's that. So originally, if it has just one introduction, we would expect a really small genetic variability, right? We're taking a random sample of a population, and we would expect that genetic variability to be small, right? Does that make sense? But okay, oh, and so here we have it in the lower Colorado River. Where are we? Right here. And then also in the Salt River. And so this is a guy that is affecting the little bit of water the ways that we have in Arizona. So originally, because it was just a small introduction from the original native population, wherever's native Asia, I think, there was a very small amount of genetic variability. But then we had multiple introductions. And so we had more sampling, you can think of it as sampling, of the genetic variability that exists in the native range of this species. And then we throw that all in the same pot. And now we have interbreeding of populations that might not otherwise interbreed in their native habitat. And that's going to lead to higher genetic variability. And why would it be useful to have high genetic variability for a species that's in a new place? Think about that with your partner for a second. So chat about that. I need to get a drink of water. So you guys talk to each other about why would it be beneficial to have high genetic variability in a new environment? Okay, what'd you guys come up with? Why is it better to have a lot of genetic variability in a novel environment? Ezekiel. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. If you have more genetic variability, you're more likely to be able to adapt to the new environment. David, were you going to say anything else? Exactly that? Perfect. Okay. That's called the genetic mosaic hypothesis. Nobody has to remember that, but there is a field of ecology that's looking at how genetic variability creates adaptability and increases biodiversity. That's a side tangent. Okay, similarly, we might get, when we start mixing populations, we might get novel genetic strains and we might get hybridization. And so let's talk about my boy Tamarisk. Yeah. So the way that we have developed the species concept of what is a species is really based on animals. And so like the working definition of a species is, can two things mate and the resulting offspring also have babies, right? So that's a really good definition for animals. But when you try to translate that into plants, that definition kind of falls apart. Because if we did that, then we would have two species of oaks. We would have red oaks and we would have white oaks. But we have like bajillions of different species of oaks, of red oaks, and we have a bajillion different species of white oaks because they live in different habitats and they have different effects on the ecosystem. So that your original question of do hybrid plants do better than hybrid animals? It kind of gets squishy because the way that we define species. But we do see this hybrid vigor in plants. And we see that when we take the genes from two different species and we smash them into the same individual, again, like we were saying, that increase in genetic variability there's more tools in the toolbox. And so there's more ways that that plant can be to be effective. But also we do see that hybrid vigor actually tapers off after several generations. So I think that I didn't answer your question, but I did answer it intentionally. Okay. Okay, so our boy Tamarisk, that we were like, what? Remember on the first day we went out and looked at it. All of the dudes in the US are not the original species. They're all hybrids. We brought these two different species over from China and put them in an overlapping range where they didn't overlap in the east. But when we brought them over to the west, they're like, oh yeah, hey buddy, how's it going? And they're like, you want to make babies with me? I was like, hell yeah. And so now we have only hybrids that are not found in that native range. We have this new genetic mixing that increases their invasiveness. Okay. And so those are the words I already said. And then there's been lots and lots of studies that have shown that because of this hybridness of tamarisk, they're able to quickly adapt to new environments. And that gives them that broad range of environmental conditions that they can withstand. It makes them better competitors, and they're more generalistic. They can live in a lot of different ways. They can use a lot of different resources. Okay. All right. And then being able to like tag along with humans as we've spread around the world, that sure is super helpful for a species to become invasive. So here's a nice little example of these Norway rats that are like hanging out with this kid. And so think about all the, if you want to do a study on pigeons, there's a really nice pigeon population in the Sam's Club parking lot. So because we, like humans, have been able to spread effectively, we're able to alter our environments effectively, we're able to acquire resources effectively, there's some extra for some other critters, right? And so tagging along with us is actually super useful for effective invasion to new habitats because we're good at it. Okay, and then there's this other thing that's the lack of dependence on mutualism. So we've talked about mutualisms. We've given some examples. We talked about mycorrhizal fungi in this class before. We've talked about pollinators in this class before. And so remember when we rolled the dice, there's a 1 in 100 chance that a species is going to be able to establish and become harmful in a new environment. If you're dependent on somebody else that's not being brought over with you, then there's a lower chance of you becoming established and becoming invasive. But if you don't need that stuff, you're good, right? I don't need a mutualist. I can do it on my own. Okay, so we've talked about how the fungi are able to access water and nutrients from the soil. So here you can see, here's the plant roots. But then all this white stuff here, that's all fungi. That's all fungal hyphae. So the fungi are able to get into those little tiny nooks and crannies, pull out the water and nutrients, because they have a bigger surface area to volume ratio. I think I said that right. And get those things. They give that to the plants photosynthesize, make glucose, and they give some of that extra glucose to the fungi in exchange for this. So we got this mutualistic partnership. And so pines are a good example of being dependent on fungi, on the mycorrhizal fungi. If they don't get mycorrhizal fungi within 3 weeks of germinating in the wild, they're dead. They have to have them. Okay, so pines are the contrary example of this dependence being able, like, right? So you would not expect pines to be invasive because they're dependent on these mycorrhizal fungi. Okay, so again, here's my boy cottonwoods. So we know that populations of Fremont cottonwood are only 3% of what they were before us white people got here. And then there's a lot of things that are going on, but one of them is our friend tamarisk. Tamarisks are associated with the decline of many riparian plants, not just Fremont cottonwood, but other willow species, other cottonwood species, because we've talked about how they're able to get more water quicker than those riparian plants. So we've shown, this is a study that was published back in 2006. And as we talk about, there's more and more tamarisk cover in a population under drought conditions, we also see that cottonwood mortality increases. So when there's more tamarisk, cottonwoods are dying faster. But also, I'll just kind of put this nugget in your brain. This is only 60% mortality. So that means even when there's a shit ton of tamarisk, there's some individual cottonwoods that can survive. Why? Why? That's what I want to know. I don't know the answer. I have a guess. But one of the things is that tamarisk, in their invasive lands, in their invasive range, do not host mycorrhizal fungi, where cottonwoods and willows are dependent on them. Not only do tamarisks not host them, or are we getting close? Okay, we got 3 more minutes. So not only do they not have them, they also reduce the diversity and the abundance of mycorrhizal fungi in the soil. So it's harder for cottonwoods and willows to grow. Okay, so this study was done on the Verde River, and they were looking at cottonwoods that either had another cottonwood growing next to them or had a tamarisk growing next to them. And when they looked at how much of these arbuscule mycorrhizal fungi, is AMF, we saw a decrease. Boop. And when we looked at the ectomycorrhizal fungi that live on the outside of the roots, we saw a similar decrease. And then when you looked at other fungi that live inside the roots that aren't really mycorrhizal, we don't know what they're doing, but then we saw an increase. And so if you're decreasing the number and the diversity of organisms that the native plants are dependent on, then you're gonna be a better competitor, right? Because you're like kind of knocking the feet out from under your competitors. Okay, I think, okay, yeah. So another thing that you might do is be able to produce toxins that can affect your competitors or your enemies. And then there's this little YouTube video that you can watch about this, this giant hogweed and how it will F you up. Okay, and then of course there's lots of exceptions to the rules. I won't talk about these, but you guys can Google this if you're interested in learning about exceptions, because there's always an exception to the rule in biology. Okay, so for Thursday, read that USGS fact sheet about humpback chub and rainbow trout. Upload your answers into that portal that I showed you on BB Learn. Do not take my dice. So I'm going to stand over there, and as you guys walk out the door, you can hand me your dice and I'll hand you some candy. Although I was instructed by my offspring to save them Sour Patch Kids and Swedish Fish. Yeah, the only reason that I hand that stuff to you is so that I can learn your names. All right, cool. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Thank you. I forgot. I have little hands. I'll get it. I'm just going to kick it over there so nobody trips on it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You want to? You don't have to have any. Okay. That was just so that I can remember your name. Okay. So you can recycle it or whatever. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. No, there's some left. Okay, awesome. Okay, cats. That's where it's at. Oh yeah. Let's chat. Okay, is that everybody? Yeah. Okay, cool.
I'll take a piece of candy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know this is my lunch. Yes. Oh no. Okay, I just lost one. So there's one in the hall and there's one under there. Okay, so I'm gonna stop this. This is my experiment. So